morning, everybody. I want to thank you for joining us. We just finished up a very productive meeting with the leadership of SEIU Local 509 and DCF Chapter President Peter McKinnon. We had a chance to talk directly with the folks who are on the ground at the department about where we are, about where we're going, and how we can work together to get there. I talked a lot during the campaign about how important the work of DCF is and remains. There's no citizen of this Commonwealth more in need of support than a child in a difficult and potentially dangerous situation. And since taking office, reforming how DCF does its job, how it is supported by the administration and by state government, has been a priority for us. Thankfully, we have two of the most qualified people I could possibly imagine to join in that dedicated work. Secretary Mary Lou Sudders, herself a social worker, as she pointed out over and over and over again this morning at the NASW meeting, is an unparalleled expert in the field, and Commissioner Linda Spears, also a social worker, a professional who has spent most of her career either working directly on the front line in social work or doing some of the most important research around what works and what doesn't. And last November, I stood right here after a similar meeting with Peter and his leadership team, where we talked about how we were going to do one very important thing, which is keep kids safe. 6 months of intense scrutiny of existing policies, 6 months of working to build consensus with frontline social workers and others, and 6 months of investing millions so that DCF can start to build the resources they need to get better at their mission, is creating progress. But let me make one point perfectly clear. We still have an enormous amount of work to do, and the job of improving how the state cares for its most vulnerable children is probably never done. But we're investing in, and I believe we are building, with the help of many others, a department that can keep kids safe and makes keeping kids safe its highest priority. In November, we announced a systemic overhaul of the department's intake policy, marking the most significant change in 20 years. These changes will enhance and clarify the rules for investigating reports of abuse and represents what I always refer to as the front door to the agency. Notably, we have eliminated the so-called two-track system, so every child's case would get the same level of scrutiny. And together, in collaboration with 509, we've developed 5 major new policies ranging from family assessment and action planning to case closing policy, which we'll be debating and discussing and pursuing over the course of the next year. Today, DCF policies require criminal background checks and sex offender background checks on all relevant people in a child's home. 911 calls to a home are now part of standard review. New case screening teams will be operating in all DCF area offices, so another set of eyes can support the social workers on the front line as they look into the most difficult cases. And nearly every social worker at DCF at this point is fully licensed. The department's hired its first full-time medical director, Dr. Linda Sagor, to provide oversight and consultation to DCF's nursing and social work staff. We've also expanded DCF's physical presence by reopening the Central Mass Regional Office to better accommodate the need of our families and children in every region of the Commonwealth. This major overhaul is the first in over 20 years for the department. Secretary Sudders and Commissioner Spears can go into greater detail about the changes, but much of this progress is a result of a major collaboration throughout the administration and the recommendations of the 2014 Child Welfare League of America report, and will continue to drill down on further developments and improvements. While we all believe we must get the policies and the procedures right, we also need the manpower, human power in this case, and talent on our front line to be able to execute these changes successfully. There was an event earlier today in Gardner Auditorium for NASW Day, National Association of Social Workers Day. And it was pretty powerful to look into a crowd of young people and those who are younger than me, who have chosen to dedicate their life to help the less fortunate. Social workers are passionate about service, and it's important we take this opportunity to stop and say thank you to them for the tireless work they do in what often may seem like a thankless job. We're very eager as well for recent graduates to fill some of those open positions we have so that we can make our mission of keeping kids safe more successful. I just want to say as governor how much I appreciate the teamwork, the communication, and the patience from everybody up and down the Department of Social Service, Department of Children and Families. 1990s slipping in there. We appreciate the constant communication, and we especially appreciate the willingness to think differently about the work. At the same time, the people have to deal with the day-to-day, which includes, among other things, the opioid epidemic, which has affected every region across this Commonwealth. The process of making these changes is at times a grinding and difficult one, and it's important that we get them right, which is why it depends so heavily on honest dialogue and conversation and a willingness to recognize when there are times to push ahead and times to breathe and consider where we've been. We are fully aware of the significant changes and challenges that remain, especially with respect to caseloads for frontline social workers, and are working with the legislature and with the union and with others to bring this number down as quickly and as safely as we possibly can. Since last July, the department has added a net increase of 170 full-time employees, which includes social workers, managers, clinical people, and administrative positions. And as governor, along with this legislature, I've directed significant funding increases for this department. Funding for DCF supervisors and social workers has increased by almost $40 million over the course of the past 3 years. And we're working to get more social workers into the pipeline to bolster manpower and add new talent to the system for what we know is already an enormously challenging job. And the most recent budget proposal that we put forward in House 2 would direct another $20 million to DCF so that they can continue to hire the best and brightest to help them solve the problems that they deal with every day. This is a significant priority for me, for the commissioner, for the secretary, for the union that represents social workers, and everyone else at DCF. One final point, we also know that the work of improving the way we care for some of these most vulnerable children will never end. We must always search for ways to improve and reform the way we serve kids so that we can best serve this most vulnerable population here in the Commonwealth. And this extremely difficult work is made more so by the heroin and opioid epidemic that has ripped across our Commonwealth. We will continue to work closely with frontline social workers and with 509. We will listen, continue to work to improve policies, and find ways to strengthen the system so that children's needs can come first and we can act to keep kids safe. Again, I want to thank the folks from 509 who are here today and the organization and its membership overall for their work and their commitment to to the kids of the Commonwealth. And I want to thank Peter McKinnon and his leadership team for the efforts that they continue to make and the imagination and the creativity and the determination and the perseverance they bring to getting this right. I want to thank you for working day and night to keep kids safe, and I especially want to thank you for the long hours and the difficult situation that you navigate every day. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Secretary Sudders.
It's now afternoon.
Sorry.
First and foremost, because it is Social Work Month, and there are a number of social workers in the room, I want to acknowledge public sector social workers, and particularly the Department of Children and Families. Their work is challenging. They are first responders in the lives of children and families in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We must not forget that. Changing policies and shifting practices that have been in place for 20 years or more is not easy. Together, we're shifting from a culture of blaming social workers to one of learning together. Systemic reforms of this kind of magnitude must balance the urgency of action needed with the deliberativeness of sustainability required. There is change all over this agency. Over the past 6 months, the department has, as you've heard, implemented new protective intake and supervision policies, trained over 1,700 staff. We've increased the number of licensed social workers to 91%. We've posted 332 positions for social workers, supervisors, and other staff. And as the governor said, we've had a net increase of 170 FTEs. And we've launched the technology upgrades to support policy implementation. However, as we focus the work for the next few months, we must redouble our efforts on recruitment and fine-tuning our training efforts. At the secretariat level, there's a complete fiscal and management support. Unlike any other agency, the department was able to replace every position that ERIPT, that's a new word in our vocabularies. Functionally, there is no employment cap. I look forward to the day, if it ever comes, when I can truly say there's no further need for social workers in the Department of Children and Families. The governor's proposed 17 budget increases social workers, as you've heard. But on the front lines, additional staff cannot come on board soon enough. Our existing social workers have not yet experienced relief in the caseloads. All of us are committed to reducing caseloads and meeting the 18-to-1. The way to get there is through recruitment of new staff and retention of existing social workers. We can't put children at risk of abuse and neglect on a wait list while we hire up. But caseloads remain too high, and we're committed to recruiting and retaining social workers. I'm particularly grateful to the honest conversation we had just a few minutes ago in the governor's office. The statewide average caseload has stabilized over the past few months, but if you're a line worker, it doesn't feel it. The average number of families assigned is 16.3. The goal is 15 families, and we need to get there. On the recruitment front, we have streamlined the hiring process to shorten the length of time to onboard someone. We have been and will continue to attend school social work recruitment fairs, including schools with students graduating in the winter plus this spring. There's 25 accredited schools of social work in Massachusetts. We've implemented statewide hiring fairs. 3 have held to date, with 3 more in the works. These have been extremely well attended and resulted in the highest number of qualified applicants in recent memory. The fairs are starting to yield a positive effect. For the first 5-month period from July through November, 147 new workers were hired as line social workers. For the period from December through April, 250 new social workers have been hired. That's a 70% uptick. 60 new workers are enrolled in the April training class that starts, I believe, on April 6th. But it takes 3 months for a new social worker to have a full caseload. We're going to be intentional to ensure that these new workers are trained and ramped up gradually to full caseloads. We'll be examining caseloads within each area office and develop individualized adjustments based on specific regional and area issues and the issues that the union brings up to management. We're going to accelerate, based on the conversation we had earlier, we're going to accelerate the hiring of social work techs. Instead of waiting until the new fiscal year, we actually will start to post them. And you have my commitment in this room, it will be posted no later than May 1st. Thank you. Of course, I'll probably have to write, no, so we will accelerate the hiring of social work techs. And the commissioner has been and will continue to hold meetings in individual offices to hear directly from line social work staff in order to make any adjustments in training and rolling out the new and revised policies. We're going to continue to work on these issues. We're going to continue to meet and refine. We're going to make the adjustments that are necessary to ensure that our line workers have the tools and manageable caseloads to meet the needs of the children in care and custody of the department. And we acknowledge that this is a work in progress. child welfare will always be a work in progress, because that's the needs of the families and kids who come to us. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Commissioner Spears to go into some greater detail about some of the policy changes and training. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Sudders, Governor Baker. Thank you for your support. You've just heard about some of the work underway. The new policies developed in partnership with SEIU, like Local 509, are designed to create a more robust response to the safety of children in the Commonwealth. I want to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to our SEIU 509 chapter leadership, all of you. They have been terrific social workers and great partners in this effort. Through this joint work, we have established 5 new policies covering in-home services from our initial contact to case closing. These include a protective intake policy, which was launched in late February and eliminates the old 2-tier response, shortens screening and response time, and requires the case history, criminal records check, and 911 calls inform safety in each and every case. A first-ever supervision policy also includes provisions for management and clinical reviews to improve case oversight and resolve discrepancies that may occur when people have differences of opinion on cases. Recently completed is a new family assessment and action planning policy. That policy streamlines casework so that parental capacities and risk factors affecting child safety are regularly reviewed, recorded, and discussed with service providers and parents. We have, for the first time in the history of the department, an in-home case practice policy that was completed this month. That policy outlines requirements for home visits and contacts with others, such as doctors, family therapists, and others serving the family. Like the new intake policy, there are new requirements for management review of cases to be sure that safety and services are on target. Finally, a new case closing policy lays out criteria for managerial review and approval of decisions to close all cases. Essential to the work of these policies is the effort to implement the new requirements across our 29 local area offices. Our priority is supporting our amazing frontline social workers and all of the staff who must work with these changes so that they have the skills and tools that they need to make the new policies work. For this reason, this cannot be a one-shot effort, but instead a sustained approach to reform that began earlier this year and will continue in the year ahead and beyond. These efforts include the already referenced technology upgrades, the first round of which was launched at the end of February to support the new supervision and protective intake policies. This includes, for the first time, an ability to track factors affecting parental capacities, such as substance abuse and domestic violence. Additional technology improvements are anticipated over the next year, beginning with upgrades for family assessment and action planning that are currently in development. We have completed training for 1,700 intake and supervisory staff between January and March to familiarize them with the requirements of the department's new protective intake and supervision policies. In the months ahead, additional training will help deepen the skills in these areas of parental capacities, risk assessment, substance use, etc., and will help us to prepare for the next round of policy implementation. In addition, implementation teams are in place in each of our 5 regions. These teams meet regularly to support training efforts and to identify implementation questions and issues that surface as the staff work with the new policies. Implementation coaches have also been hired and assigned to work with local offices to support implementation. We'll be expanding access to coaching as the reforms progress. We have also developed frequently asked questions and other documents, including practice guidance, that will help answer detailed policy and practice questions that staff identify. Finally, new quality improvement metrics will allow us to stay on top of what is working with the new policies and where we can improve performance. These policy changes and implementation plans outlined are a first step in the long process of reform. This work will take time and continued attention to achieve and sustain the desired results for children. In addition to the implementation work just outlined, I will continue to meet regularly with frontline staff to support their work. We will also pay detailed attention to reducing caseloads so staff can do their best to implement the new policies and keep children safe. Again, I want to express my tremendous gratitude for the support that these changes have received from our staff, from the union, and from the administration. And at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague and partner, Peter McKinnon. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. As Governor Baker, Secretary Sudders, Commissioner Spear, and all of us on the front lines have made clear, it is important that we recognize how far we've come at the Department of Children and Families in just a few short years. The Commonwealth has invested millions of dollars in frontline hires, bringing a net of more than 300 staff since the start of the crisis in 2.5 years ago. Policy reforms we've pushed for years are finally becoming a reality, and attrition rates have begun to slow for the first time in recent memory. We have a lot to be proud of. The work we've done so far is vital to the long-term health of the agency. But the systemic challenges we confront together are more than 3 decades in the making, and our efforts to date are just the tip of the iceberg. Today, frontline child protection workers met with the Governor, Secretary, and Commissioner to assess progress made and the challenges ahead. We had an honest conversation about the state of the Department of Children and Families at this time, the kind of open dialogue that has been critical to our reform efforts so far. I'll say to you now what we told the Governor's team just a short while ago. Those of us on the front lines are proud of the foundation we have laid for meaningful change at DCF. But we are also more aware than ever of the immediate need to address key challenges in the field, not the least of which is the persistent caseload crisis. Together, we've crafted common sense best practice policies around intake and investigation of cases at DCF. But training on this new policy has been inconsistent at best and inadequate at worst. Some of the trainers don't seem to have a solid understanding of the policy reforms we worked so hard to institute, and incorrect information has been given on more than one occasion. Needless to say, frontline workers must fully understand the key changes that we've made. That requires that trainers who are the best of the best are out there when it comes to their grasp of reform. Of equal concern is that some local managers are having difficulty understanding and implementing the new policy. Without proper implementation and oversight, policies are only as good as the paper they're written on. We certainly can't allow bottlenecks or sluggish execution at the agency's front door, and local managers must be held accountable to the critical reforms we've put in place. Most importantly, we shared our continued concerns with caseloads that remain at crisis levels. To the administration's credit, considerable progress has been made in hiring, but we have also lost workers at an unsustainable rate. The opioid crisis and other persistent challenges have kept the overall number of cases at historic highs. Now, more than ever, we can't afford to lose so many experienced social workers and investigators. We all agree that the best way to address issues with morale and attrition is to bring caseloads down to safer, more manageable levels. In short, Governor Baker and his team asked for the truth about the state of the Department of Children and Families from the perspective of those of us who do this work every day. And that's exactly what we offered. A frank assessment of our accomplishments to date, as well as the long road ahead. Again, I want to be clear about our accomplishments. We have put a series of critical long-term fixes in place. Hiring is on the upswing. Resources are being appropriated. And the rewriting of long outdated policies to guide the work we do is happening. But I don't believe we're in a place where anyone would feel comfortable calling the agency fixed. As long as caseloads and attrition rates remain high, the department is a work in progress. This work will require the continued attention and leadership of Governor Baker, Secretary Sudders, Commissioner Spears, and all of our legislative leaders, and the continued commitment of frontline child protection workers in the Commonwealth. We've come a long way so far, and we have an even longer road ahead. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I'm proud of the foundation that's in place, and I look forward to continuing our work to bring the long overdue reform and investment to the Department of Children and Families.
Questions on this topic?
Where's the caseload ratio now? Mr. McKinnon talked about it being so that crisis level. Where does it stand in relation to that 18-to-1 goal?
All three of us can answer it. Probably will be the same. Will be the same. So the statewide average caseload for the month of January was 20.99 to 1.
And that's the same weighted as the 18-to-1?
Yes.
That's on the 18-to-1
Yeah,
weighting.
Yes, that's on the 18-to-1. But the problem with averages is it's an average. And what we've agreed to going forward is to really look at median caseloads, which will give a much better sense of what caseloads are. But to go back to the 20.99, and the range is 18.66 up to a high of 23.59 to 1.
From office.
Right, from office to office. That's the range. But we, like I said, we've agreed to really look at, and so the caseload sort of stabilized if you look over a period of 3 months. But again, we really need to be looking at the medians.
Is the family number a better one to use for now, do you think?
Well, you know, yeah, it's
kind
the
of the
same.
same.
The math, the way we've calculated the math, they come out to the same thing. We've translated the 15-to-1 caseload into an 18-to-1 standard for caseloads. In looking at the numbers, what's really clear is that in each office, what constitutes those 20.99 that may be an average is a little different. There may be more children in certain families. There may be more complicated cases in certain offices. So the numbers don't tell the whole story, and that's part of what we want to get to, so that we really understand the work burden that people are dealing with office to office.
Commissioner, I just wanted you to comment on what happened in Dorchester this weekend, where a woman was driving, flipped her car over, charged with drunk driving. She had a 3-week-old baby in her car that was her child. What's your reaction as a commissioner to hearing something like that?
Well, I think my reaction is exactly, I think, what the average citizen's reaction is. It's an awful circumstance, an absolutely awful circumstance. We're grateful that that child is doing okay. We're investigating. We'll continue to work with law enforcement on this case as it goes forward. We took custody of that child to ensure their safety.
Secretary or Commissioner, since you guys have put in place at least the new policy, the one where you're doing Corey and Story and all those checks, have you guys seen the increase? I know you're trying to get more foster families, but has that resulted in increased families being denied or seeking to become foster families or be involved, given that there's more kind of stringent checks you put in place?
Not as of yet. We're working, as a matter of fact, we've actually seen a slight increase because we're actually working to resolve backload and increase the number of people that are getting through the process more quickly. So we're actually handling the process differently than we were in the past, which we hope will bring us more families who are qualified and pass the checks.
What was the backlog? I know it said 75% been reduced.
And back in probably October, we had about 1,200 families in the backlog. We've reduced 75% of that.
Do you know offhand how many actually were approved?
I don't have that number offhand.
Do you have the numbers for the attrition rates offhand? It says stabilized for the first time in memory.
There's some of the data I know that we're digging into. I can say that from January, February, and March of this year, we've seen net gains each month in the number of hires, up 100
Against the number of
since the
people
beginning.
who left.
Against
Yeah, right. So the hires have been continuing. In the last 3 months consecutively, we've seen increases in the number of staff in each of the 3 months, and that's a positive trend that we certainly hope continues.
But can you quantify the attrition? You framed it pretty stark.
I think some of the data is we're digging into it, and that was some of the conversations we had just before this, where we're getting that data, and also finding out why people are leaving. You know, are they retiring? Are they getting promoted? Are they quitting? Because that's important information.
Any update on the 3-year-old death from Alpine Street in Roxbury when he was rushed to the hospital with trauma?
The
3-year-old white little boy, last name by the name of
Yes,
White.
yes.
Outledge.
Yes, that case is still in investigation, so I don't have any updates beyond that. We are still working, law enforcement is still investigating.
Commissioner Peter talked about some trouble at the moment in terms of the training. The frontline staff feel like the trainers aren't necessarily up to speed on that, and some problems with implementation. Can you speak to that, what you're doing?
Yeah, we rolled out really fast the new policies in an effort to begin the change process quickly. What that means is that we had training that was done very, very quickly in January and February. That also meant that we knew we needed to go back and to have more trainings as we go forward. I referenced when I spoke about the policy, the trainings that we'll need to do on detailed policy. The first round of training was really about the requirements of the policy. In my view, the next rounds of training really need to be about the clinical practice under the policy. How do you do parental assessment capacity training? How do you do risk assessments? All of those things that are part of the policies, and we'll get those trainings in order soon.
You mentioned, Commissioner, the technology changes. I'm hoping to be able to track rental capacity, including around, I just want to clarify, you said that the system allowing tracking around drug use in homes and such, that is in effect now?
Yeah, we've just started it, so if, as new cases are coming into the system, we'll be able to actually talk about and know how many of those cases was there an initial allegation related to substance abuse, domestic violence, and other factors.
Do you know when that went on? Did that just go online?
That went online literally the end of February.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you.